Hello, and welcome back to the tavern. In this week of Gatekeepers, we're discussing how do we include weather in our games. From blustering storms at sea to the arid dry spells of the dunes, and even the cerulean skies of floating islands, weather can spell fortune or disaster for an adventuring company. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to this channel, and the channel's linked in the video description. If you enjoyed tonight's content, make sure to hit that like button, as it helps the channel grow and helps us know what we are doing and if we're doing, good or bad. If you dislike tonight's content, don't be bashful, hit that dislike button. I won't take offense. I take offense to very little in this world. Without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Hello, my name's Jaide, and this is my Tabletop Tavern. Joining me tonight is going to be Shadow of Shadow and Sun. Welcome, sir. You are muted.
Howdy, folks.
There we go. Some technical glitches. And joining us also is MarHawkman. Welcome.
Good evening. Sorry about that. My internet spazzed out again.
Man. Chat has been going nuts since right about the time we were supposed to start. Actually, about 15 minutes before we were supposed to start. Welcome, everyone. Six Nations. Mar, you're in the chat. I see that. Welcome, Russ. See here. Well, there also includes mods. Yeah. Yep, it absolutely does. Mac, welcome. And Flady, welcome to you too.
What's up, Mac? Long time no see, buddy.
Just making my way down the chat, and we've got the Crafting Gamer in here as well.
Russell Myers, welcome to the show.
He's been in a few of ours in the past. So.
TCG, long time no see.
Yeah, all right. So,
I know what Flady's talking about, but that's a different topic.
So weather, it affects more than you might realize. Weather plays a big role in a lot of different cultures. Some of the old diaries of, farmers and even, people who sailed the seas, they, in a lot of cases, started with what the daily weather was in their diary. So it has played a huge role in our world throughout history. So that being said, how poignant is weather to the world that your players are going to be, living in and surviving in? Now, I can say with some degree of assertion that most game masters I have played at the table for have not included weather, or when they did include weather, they were including it as a mechanic or gimmick or some kind of a means to an end. They weren't doing it just because they'd rolled randomly on a weather chart and be like, oh, well, this is today's weather. They had a point to use it during the session. However, I have used weather differently. And that's kind of what I want to talk about tonight. So, first and foremost, how is everyone doing?
Fantastic. Got a bunch of yard work done, put the boys to work. Some of you saw that video, some of you not yet. Bribed them into giving the dog a bath for a promise of spaghetti and meatballs. Everybody was happy, and I'm ready to do this. Let's light this candle.
Awesome. Lamar, how you doing?
I woke up with a crick in my neck that hasn't gone away. But other than that, I'm okay.
Yeah, those cricks in the neck, especially when it starts turning cold out for me. Ooh, man. All my joints start hurting, and it's no fun.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. You got, in the old days, a human D&D wizard, he's already starting out like middle-aged, So it's on his first freaking adventure, he's all like, all jacked up just from the weather. His knees are going out, his back is aching, and his all of 3 to 6 hit points are, feeling their age.
Absolutely. So let's talk about let's open the night up with setting a scene. So generally, when you introduce the party to whatever adventure they're setting out on, you normally set the scene. You fill the scene with what is around them. But how many times have you been at a table, or been the game master at a table, and you've set the scene to include weather? Let's start there. Shadow, have you included weather in your opening scenes?
Absolutely. As a prepper, survivalist, the whole bit, weather is like the first thing you need to know before setting foot outdoors. Or you've got one of those Indian sticks that's suspended by a a cord or something. So if it's moving, it's windy. If it's wet, it's rainy. That kind of thing. You need to know all of that. And what I like to do is take a page from Tolkien himself, and I give them the most beautiful, glorious day in their hometown before they leave. Give them something to remember, something to want to come home to, because a couple of days later, it's just going to all turn to crap.
Okay. And what about you, Mar? Do you when you open up a scene for a party that is just starting out, do you ever include the weather?
Well, I mean, weather's just part of the environment. I mean, like, okay, you're in the forest and it's it's warm because it's summer, but it's overcast and threatening to rain. That's just part of the way that the world that the players are in is described. And it's not necessarily important to the story. A lot of time it's just there for set dressing, but sometimes it's something they need to pay attention to.
Okay. So as far as me, man, when I do my horror themed nights or sessions, or even like was it when I did the Beneath the Door series, on my channel, I set the scene early on with you tromp up to the doors of this mansion in the dark and the rain and the cold, and as you're trouncing through the mud up to the steps, the rain is coming in at a slight slant. What I'm doing is I'm setting the mood for the rest of the evening. They know it's going to be raining. They know it's going to be a cold, slightly gusty rain. Now, setting it as just a set piece or as a thematic piece for the night can do a lot on the player side mentally. If you can set a scene where they're out at sea and they've got nice breeze, nice tailwind pushing them along the seas, and then the captain comes storming out of the cabin, or his personal cabin, and he looks to the sky and he says, we should batten down the hatches. We'll be expecting rain. And when you look out over the horizon, you see these storm clouds gathering out, way out in the distance. And it's not something somebody would have just, happened to see. No, the captain knows the seas. He knows how the weather changes. He knows what to feel, and he's got the instruments in his cabin to look for these things. So, when there are clouds gathering, at the high seas, you're probably going to be in for a rough ride for the next several hours. So, Shadow.
Yep.
How crucial of a role does setting the narrative scene with weather play out in your games?
Well, like I said before, I want them to have that sort of fond memory of their home. I'm gonna set it with beautiful weather. Give them one more thing to miss about where they grew up or wherever they were at, so that they have a reason to think about it fondly, because so often it's just another town, along a stretch of many more towns and villages and cities the players are gonna travel through. And more often than not, I've seen it so many times where the players can't, remember the names. All the towns and cities sort of meld into the same, medieval Europe sort of feel. And using weather, especially if they're going to go into different places. I like, running a lot of high sea games. So weather's going to be a huge part as well. But I also like running those, sort of Arabian Nights themed games. So
Vacuum
I'm gonna,
weather.
or even, Wild West games. Weather's a big deal there. The Great Silence was such a great Western movie because it was one of the few, if the only one, set in the snow, a Western in the snow. It set the whole theme and feel of the movie. And I like to do that with, with my Westerns and my Arabian Nights, get them to hate the weather. It's going to be hot and miserable. Water's going to be a huge issue. Make them think about these things that they would normally just take for granted.
Absolutely. How about you, Mark? Can you provide the video? If I can speak tonight, can you provide an example of when weather played a crucial role in the narrative or play experience at your table?
Well, one of the Hyperborea games I was in, we had a session where our goal was to investigate what had happened to this mansion that someone had built on their estate on top of a mountain. And the top of the mountain, when we got there anyways, was covered in several feet of snow. And it was constantly snowing while we were there. As a consequence of this, we had to make camp inside the mansion after fighting things because the fact that making camp outside, well, we're buried in snow if we stay outside.
Yeah.
I think also with that one, another one is that as a plot element is that, anytime someone was outside walking through the snow, making tracks in the snow. So, there would be things like, oh, hey, someone was walking over there. You can see fresh tracks that weren't there yesterday, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Actually, I took a group from a kind of a mild, maybe a mid-Mediterranean climate, and I sent them far to the north as an invasionary point to start their exploration into a land that had been claimed by an enemy force. And the land they were going to was cold. It was bitterly cold, and there was snow everywhere. I'm talking like feet of snow. And when they first got there, they were outfitted. They were given the gear they needed based on the person who was sending them that direction. They knew there was going to be a cold. They knew it was winter time where they were heading. So they, gave them all the winter gear they needed to be able to go up there and survive. And it was so bitterly cold that I was having them roll survival and constitution checks, because it was one of those situations where even though you have the survival gear, it is so unbearably cold. And they had to face whiteout conditions, among other things. Trudging through the snow, it slowed them down. It made their progress kind of awful. But they persevered and they got through it, and they found their way, further south so that they could get to warmer climates where it wasn't as snowy, but it was definitely muddy. And let's see here. Welcome, Bo, to the show, and welcome, Bruce, to the show. How you guys doing? And yes, Honor Harrington is a good book series. I have enjoyed it as well. And you're right, solar winds are a thing. So let's talk about dynamic environments for a moment. In what ways do you incorporate the dynamic weather changes during gameplay? To keep the environment engaging and challenging for the players. Mara, I'm going to start with you on this one. So how does your weather change from scene to scene or moment to moment, or is it a static thing?
That's something that I would only put in drastic changes if there's a very specific reason for it. I mean, like, it's like one thing you see sometimes people do in hex scrolls, like, okay, roll on the random weather chart. Let's see what we get today. Yesterday, it was 3 feet of snow. Today, we have hailstones. That
I hate that. I hate that.
It's something people can do if they want to. I personally don't like it because, like I was saying with that one in the mountains, is that it logically made sense for the place to have snowfall the entire time we were there, and not just suddenly like, oh, it's warm and rainy today. No, but it's like having weather change because of the fact that, or the environment change because you physically moved from one place to another, that makes sense, or if something specific happens to make the weather change.
I like to go with a calendar. Worldwide, the weather is incredibly predictable depending on what time of year it is. And, if I start them out in spring, what's going to be next? Summer.
Well, I mean, like
fall, winter.
Old-fashioned almanacs were the result of people writing down what the weather was for several years in a row. And it's like, oh, this is what we should expect.
And within
Absolutely.
a little bit of margin of error or something drastic, a wizard's or druid is changing the weather, you should be able to predict it and just let the calendar guide you along. Even if you do travel into a different area, how far have they traveled? Have they literally, traveled 1,000 miles? If they've only traveled 50, 100 miles, the weather's not going to change that much. Look at the United States. Throughout the USA right now, it's cold. Some places are colder, but it's definitely heading toward, winter. I'm going to just go with that. That's why I like to start them out in spring, lull them into a false sense of security. Oh, it's springtime, pack light, blah, blah, blah. Next thing they know, 6 months later, they're, wishing they would have spent more of their hard-earned loot on the right equipment.
So 6 months later, you're like, oh yeah, remember those hides we sold for a few extra gold coin? Maybe we should have made coats out of those.
Yep. Or bought tents, or bought a chisel so that when they do need to take a dump, they can break through the ice.
Now, what I'm showing on screen here, let me get back down to winter. So that's where we are. Now, this is just one example of how weather changes, at least in my games. It's a 2d6 system, and based on where you currently are on this hex grid, you move to one of these other hexes, and that is your new weather effect for the next day, or whatever the case might be. If my players are climbing a mountain, or they start out climbing a mountain and it's already lightly raining or misting on the side of that mountain, the further up they go, the colder it's going to get. The colder it gets, more likely that they're going to run into snow or into other effects. They could be running into hail. They could be running into sleet. When they crest the top of the mountain, they might be above the cloud layer and don't have to worry about snow as much anymore. Now they've got to worry about windstorms, wind knocking them down the mountain. So they might start off with, let's see here, wet snowfall and move to, a snowy rain, or to a cold and cloudy condition where it stops, raining or snowing for a moment before.
I was going to say, you don't have any freezing rain on there.
Let's see here, light drizzle, heavy rains. I think freezing rain. Yeah, there's sleet, icy and cloudy. It's down here. But as you progress, in a certain environment, weather can change, especially on the high seas. You might skirt around a large storm. Doesn't mean that you're going to be outside of the possibility of changing weather conditions at a moment's notice. Then hurricanes can change direction with the, the different temperatures that are over the water. So, you might be skirting the bottom edge of it when suddenly, the wind starts shifting and now it's coming more towards you.
I mean, there is actually a rather famous case from real life of a uh, rather large cargo ship getting sunk by a hurricane because the weather report that his captain was using said that the hurricane was going to go that way, when in reality the hurricane went a different direction towards them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, if your weather is dynamic, it makes it a little more believable. And I think that's been my issue as a player is most game masters, again, only use it as a set piece. They don't make it dynamic. They don't make it, with the possibility that it could change against the players for some reason. Now, it should be a random roll. It shouldn't be just I decide it's going to change. No, it should be, a timed event or an event that happens randomly. And honestly, let your players roll that. Let your players roll to determine what weather they have for the day. Give them the dice and say, here, roll this, and you compare it to a chart. Well, this is your weather for the day. They rolled it, not you. Let me get back to my questions. So, dynamic weather events can impact your players because they might start out the day expecting, nice weather, light breeze, maybe in the, mid 60s to 70s, or, if you're in the Celsius, I think low 30s. I don't really use centigrade much, but, so they might start that way, but by the end of the day, a cold breeze comes in from the mountains and they start, getting a chill. And now they have to start making con checks to, survive the cold because they didn't dress appropriately for colder temperatures. Now, Shadow, are there specific weather effects that you find particularly effective or in some cases disruptive to gameplay?
Anything that obscures their vision, fog, rain, snow, dust storms. As soon as you do that, they have to be on their toes. Getting lost is a real thing, and thousands of people every year die from being lost. Even here in the United States, you stray off that trail or something like that. Next thing you know, you have no idea where you are, and you'd be amazed how few people actually know how to navigate over land without street lights and landmarks.
I mean,
So,
the sheer number of cases of people getting lost in national parks because they were following a trail and they somehow lost the trail and never were seen alive again.
mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I like to throw more challenges than just combat. I was talking with somebody the other day. I like to have a nice split of combat, investigation, exploration, and other sort of whether it's role playing or things like this, which I suppose you could put in the exploration category as well. But things that keep them on their toes, so that dust storms are another great example, and those happen not just in the desert. You can have them on a big enough stretch of beach. You can have them in what do you call it? Plains land as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Colorado, we actually had them at the foot of Pikes Peak. It's just dusty enough, despite the fact that we have trees everywhere, that it would sometimes blow around enough sand around.
Yep.
Actually,
and that can make their animals that can interfere with the animals behaving and working properly and getting ornery, especially if they're dealing with donkeys or mules. They're not going to be happy about that. And then you got to take care of them, clean them off, do all kinds of things that can delay them. Maybe they're in a hurry, or maybe they're in a hurry, but they know it's going to take them a couple of weeks to get where they're going. Well, you keep doing those things like that, and next thing they know, they're a week behind, or even 2 weeks, and that can make a huge difference. And get them to potentially make mistakes. I don't want to make it sound like we're just trying to screw them over, with all kinds of different new and ingenious ways of doing that. It's more of helping them learn some things along the way so that they'll play better and survive better, because I'm not going to change up, the weather and the harshness of a game because they're not ready for all these things I'm going to throw at them. They need to, learn, overcome, adapt, and be better players, because someday they're going to be in somebody else's game. And if they learn these things, like we're talking about, to prepare for the weather, they may go into a group that's never, ever, had to deal with any of this stuff. And especially if you're like playing a ranger, you play a ranger, you come to a new group and you're showing everybody all these neat new tricks, and then it spreads, and all these players will take that info out into, not just the gaming world, but, you might think about it, next time you go on a road trip, it's like, well, hey, you know what? I'm going to go get a couple of things just in case of an emergency.
And you brought up a good point, or actually, chat brought up a good point with dust storms. You see, I live in central Illinois in the United States, and just over, I think it was the summer, there was a nasty dust storm, nasty windstorm that hit the center of the state, and it kicked up a lot, and I mean a lot of farm dust. The fields, I think it was back in spring, the fields had just been disked. They were, getting ready for planting season. And we had winds that were pushing the dust from the freshly disked fields across a interstate highway. I think 6 people died. I'm not sure the number, not 100% on that number, but I know several people died in that because they lost visibility of the highway. They could not see anything, and people started panicking. They started stopping, which caused people behind them to hit them at 55, 60 or 70 mile an hour, because, you suddenly, you're able to see, and then suddenly you're not able to see, traveling at 70 mile an hour. Holy crap, what just happened? You won't even know if you've hit something yet.
When your visibility drops below 20 feet, you just can't drive.
Right. And the same can be said for adventuring too. If your visibility drops too far and you're on horseback or even on a wagon, like you don't know if you're gonna drive your horse into a pothole of some kind or off the beaten path. A lamed horse is basically a detriment to a party. You're not going to get that horse back up on its feet, and through anything short of magic. Most people, especially in our world, when a horse broke its leg in the medieval ages, it became dinner. Like there was no healing it. It became dinner.
I mean, that actually reminds me of a story about one of the most famous racehorses in the heyday of the horse races in the U.S. This was a horse that, for reasons that were probably related to how it had been trained and raised, it late in its career broke its leg by overstraining itself and refused to remain still enough for its leg to heal. So they had wanted to use it as a breeding stud, but they couldn't because of the fact that it kept re-injuring itself.
Yeah. So what about you, Mar? Is there any type of weather that you just find particularly effective at the table, or even particularly hated at the table?
Well, man, it's like what was said earlier about things that obscure your vision. One that people don't think about as much as some of the others is that there's several different ways you can have vision obscuring weather effects. Like there's the old fog, like a heavy fog has rolled in off of the sea, that sort of thing. That's an option. Sandstorms, if a sandstorm's bad enough, it will reduce your visibility quite a lot. Rain can sometimes be able to do that too. you also have snow. There's a certain kind of snow called powder snow where when it's coming down, the flakes are large enough and float so long coming to the ground that it actually creates an obstruction to seeing. And stuff like this is actually something where it can actually change relatively quickly in real life.
One of the things that I think was one of the most wretched part about that group that went to the frozen north in that game I was running was they'd be in a pitched battle and the wind would kick up and it would kick up the powdered snow off the top few feet of snow off the ground, and it would obscure everything on the battlefield for about 3-4 rounds. So they were moving in the snow trying to find cover because it was also a firearm based game. So there was a lot of cover opportunities. There were a lot of firing from cover and trying to obstruct the vision of your enemy so they couldn't see you enough to fire at you. And one of the battles I remember kind of clearly is that the adventuring party had found themselves out in the middle of a field, and they started taking fire from an enemy position. And I was rolling for wind conditions, and one of the wind conditions came up that said it was going to be gusty during that day they were adventuring. So they knew that the wind was kicking up and powdered snow was kicking up every once in a while, and they would stop for I think a few minutes to let the snow drop back down before they continued adventuring. So when they got into this fight, they knew there were going to be moments where the snow would obscure their vision long enough to get to a different firing position on their enemies. And the party used that to their advantage, but it also hampered them because they didn't know where the enemy was coming from at first. Until they started seeing the rounds of ammunition peppering the snow around them, because the enemy wasn't a great shot. I was rolling a lot of 2s and 3s and 1s with automatic weapon fire, so I was spraying and praying more so than actually accurate firing. Curse my dice, but. So they got an idea of where the enemy was. So they used the blinding curtains of snow to their advantage to take cover to, get to positions of, firing for effect against their enemy. And it worked out in their favor. Now it could have gone the opposite direction in a hurry. Like we could have had a TPK that night. If they hadn't thought to use the weather to their advantage.
That's a great point. People who don't know us, could easily come into this episode tonight and think, like I said earlier, that we're just, finding, new and unique ways to screw over our party members. But, all these things work both ways. A good party, a group of good, thinkers, good players, they're going to use these to, create an advantage for themselves if they're worth their salt.
Yeah.
Hopefully, players out there will, find ways, it's raining or it's snowing or whatever. Hey, that's a great, use that as cover to sneak up to the fortress, and then throw your hooks, when the lightning, crashes, then throw your grappling hook. They didn't hear it because of the lightning, or you have cover of fog or rain or things like that, or use the snow to help track the ogres back to their lair, things like that.
So let's get into how weather may impact travel or even navigation. How do you use weather to impact travel and navigation in your world? Mara, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Well, I've done several different things related to weather in games. One of them, we actually had traveling via ship. Not a sailing ship, mind you, but a ship nonetheless. And running into storms at sea is a problem if you know, can't if well, a ship that's designed for it, great. Most ships aren't. So, we had to avoid getting caught in storms when we were sailing. And
Okay.
I mentioned that the previous one is like walking several miles through deep snow. You kind of sort of want to do that in the daytime because you don't want to be outside at night in weather like that.
No. That's pretty nasty. What about you, Shadow? How do you use weather to impact travel for your players?
It has a constant nuisance. Mother Nature hates us. She really does. All you druids and tree huggers and what have you, nature hates us indiscriminately. Each and every one of us, nature is out to get us. And in a game world, I'm going to use that every chance I get to make it more challenging. Because that's in the end, that's really what we're trying to do is create the most challenging game we can for our players. And the more you know about it, the more you can use it.
Yeah. So
specifically, it really depends on the game situation. I'm gonna, as a avid camper and prepper, I've been through just about everything except tornadoes, and I'm really, really hoping I never get to see those things. Because that right there. That's the one thing I would never ever do. That nothing screams "I'm trying to kill you" like a tornado. You know what I mean? Have you ever?
I may have thrown one once.
Really? But was it
just once?
But was it just the weather, or was it brought on by a wizard? You bring it on by a wizard, that's totally different. You know what I mean?
It was actually brought on by a druid who the party had severely pissed off.
Right. That's totally different. If you just pull one out of your, DM whatever, without someone behind it, even if it's the gods, at least then, they know they can gather some information from the fact that there's a tornado bearing down on them. But if you just put them out in the middle of Kansas and suddenly you throw a tornado out there, that's a little heavy-handed. Otherwise, just about everything else I think is totally fair game. When it comes to the weather. Although volcanoes, you might want to put volcanoes in there, and I don't really consider that weather. It can be, but
volcanoes can make weather, though. Right. When they erupt, they can make weather.
Yeah, I don't know that I can pull off a volcano erupting right as they get within range. That's going to come across also. Again, unless there's a red dragon living up there and he's screwing with things. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so as far as and we kind of covered this in calamities last year, where things like volcanoes and whatnot, they happen, they occur. You can have those in your game. You can have earthquakes happen naturally. They can affect gameplay and player action and player plans.
Yeah, but if a player character's within 100 miles of a volcano, it could very well just be death. Not even a save. Could be.
Also,
there's going to be warning signs before that even happens, though.
With some volcanoes, while they will suddenly erupt and start doing stuff, the ones that tend to have lingering weather-like effects will sometimes do that for months.
Absolutely. And again, you will have warning signs before it happens. So, if you're sitting at a table and your game master, over the course of multiple in-game days or weeks says that, the ground shakes, with low rumbling, that could mean a couple of things. It could mean, well, either you're near a fault line and, the ground just quakes all the time, or you're near a volcano that's probably about to go off. somewhere in the vicinity. Or you have a bunch of goblins or orcs underneath your feet and you need to be worried. So, what about you, Mar? How does weather impact travel and navigation? No, I already asked you this, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yep.
Both of
Okay.
us. We're on to the next one.
Sorry. Yes, I will move on to the next one.
This will teach you next time to have those slides ready.
Right. Like, if I wasn't working so damn much, like I would have stuff probably more prepared. But hopefully that goes to the wayside in the near future. So thinking about travel and how weather can impact travel, you can either slow travel or it can expedite travel. Have there been any instances at your table or a table you've been to where the random weather that was rolled significantly altered the players' plans on where they're going and how they were getting there? Shadow, I'll start with you on that one.
Absolutely. Any, again, Tolkien, he wanted the players to go into Moria. They didn't want to go into Moria. It's an oldie but a goodie, and feel free to use it. The players don't want to go in your dungeon or your creepy woods or take that canyon pass. They want to go the long way around. Well, there's a reason why people don't do that. Maybe it's the weather. Gamma ray bursts. Yeah, maybe.
Space weather is a thing, and it absolutely can wreck your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just that it's usually weather of a brand new planet, and I being the sci-fi guy, I should have been thinking about this from the beginning. Different ways to use weather and maybe even new types of weather. If you can come up with something
Actually,
that's never been seen before.
I've been sitting on one of those for 5 minutes.
Yeah, go for it.
A sci-fi setting, you could have a planet where it has meteor showers every morning, just because it's morning, and that's what this planet does.
I'm trying to work out the physics of behind that, because my mind works around logic and physics, and I'm like, the only thing I'm coming up with is the cold side of the planet is very, very cold.
Well,
And
no,
it's not necessarily
like
meteors; it's ice.
these would actually be space rocks in the example I think you have, is because like the solar system that it's in has, for some reason, a debris cloud, and
Wow, okay.
It's not so much that it's because it's morning, it's that a certain angle is hitting the planet, and it's all, and on which side of the planet it is, it always has stuff falling on it, but the planet rotates, so whether the planet side you're on is getting hit with space rocks changes.
Okay. Wow. That would be one hell of a planet to live on, having meteor showers every morning.
I mean, I'm not talking about large ones. I'm actually talking about like a gravel sized things. So it's more of an annoyance than a deadly threat, but still.
I mean, even gravel, its terminal velocity is enough to do some, bodily harm. So yeah, that is a wild weather pattern. I wasn't even thinking about like alien or strange planets like that. Good on you. So what about you, Mar? Have you ever had an instance either at a table or at your own table where the weather conditions changed for some reason, and it affected how players were going to get somewhere? And how did it happen?
I was actually trying to think of an example of that, and can't really think of one was like a particularly major change. But I mentioned that the whole thing about a ship is that, oh, well, you could go that way, but there's a storm there, or you could stay in harbor for a day and hope that the storm passes. And I mean, it sounds simple when you put it that way, but staying in harbor as an adventure party is not really as boring as it sounds.
Yeah. For me, weather has played a role in several games. But one of the instances that was the most significant for the players was they knew they were heading into monsoon season, and it was a game that was based on sailing. So they knew they were going to have gusts of wind to be able to carry them from one point to another. And this was during the piracy game years and years ago, where there were two different crews going at the same time with two different game masters. So the one crew knew that monsoon season was on the rise. It was arriving. They're like, hey, if the winds are in our favor, how long would it take to get from point A to point B if we skirted the edge of the storm and let it carry us there? And me, the game master at the time, I'm like, well, the winds of the monsoon are moving a pretty good clip. You could probably shorten your journey there in 3/4 of the time that would normally take. They're like, you know what? We're going to do it. It's like, however, you do know that monsoon storms are not great to ride in on seas. Like, it's not going to be a fun ride. And they're like, oh no, we're not concerned about that. We want to get there sooner. So the party literally made the decision based on weather to go, we are going to take the wildest ride that we can just to arrive there faster than the other crew.
I mentioned the El Faro earlier, although not by name, and the crew of the El Faro would probably tell you that was a terrible idea.
They nearly scuttled their boat on a number of occasions during that time. The other crew arrived almost 3 times as long later. I think it was several months later, because they decided they were going to take the land option during monsoon season instead of the boat option. They arrived safe, but they arrived far too late to retrieve the prize by months. So, based on, both crews going at it at the same time, one crew decided to play safe, the other crew decided to play dangerous. They both made choices based on the weather that was happening at the time. So, it can definitely affect, or your players, can choose based on what the weather conditions are, what they decide to do next. And it can lead to some pretty interesting gameplay. So, now we get to the idea that, weather can also be a storytelling tool. You might have those moments between major scenes of a game where the party holds up for a couple months, working on training, working on other downtime activities between missions. Maybe sharing how the game world's weather, changes over the course of a couple months might give them idea of the passage of time, because weather, even in our own world, like when we get into wintertime, there are people who suffer like wintertime depression because it's gray, it's never really sunny, it's always raining. The weather's just, being outside is just crap. And a lot of people get really down on this during this time, because they normally live their life outside. They normally go be outside and do outdoor things, but they can't because of the weather.
I actually find that daylight savings time triggers that in me, because the fact is, like, suddenly it's like nightfall is 1 hour sooner than my brain thinks it should be.
Right. So can you share an example of how you've used weather as a storytelling tool to either like foreshadow events, build tension, or even enhance a specific moment during your games or during a game you've been in? Mara, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I can't think of any time I have like the weather changed at a pivotal moment. Although that one thing with the mountaintop mansion, I forget the name of that module. But that one we did actually have the weather change somewhat while we were fighting outside. And one of the things that is like the one guy said in chat earlier is like, it's like if you can't see someone because your visibility is too low, that cuts the maximum range on ranged attacks. So having that significant effect on the way the combat's going.
Yeah.
That's the only one I can think of that I actually where it actually changed something directly in the middle of the story.
Mac, take it from me. You never want to be in the middle of the sea on a boat that's half the size of, let's say, a standard cruise liner and have rough weather. It is just awful when the swells are taller than your boat. It's just plain awful.
I was stationed at Fort Myer, Virginia, when Hurricane Isabel made landfall. Okay, it was downgraded to a tropical storm at the time, but whatever. I still have a scar on my leg from slipping and falling and breaking a tree branch with my shin.
So, Shadow, how about you? Can you share an example of how you've used weather, or weather has been used at a table you've been at as a storytelling tool to either foreshadow events, build tension, or even enhance a specific moment in the game?
I've used it a lot of times with, as a portent of evil, where certain weather phenomenon will be literally taken as a sign from the gods, or proof that some evil is afoot, especially with like NPCs being born, like the king's son is born and there's a absolute terrible storm coming down, and sure enough the kid grows up to be a bastard, or a witch is being born because of this kind of a storm, somewhere in the world, preferably nearby where the players are, but they know a witch is being born, or something like that. As far back as we can look, bad weather has always been taken as a sign of, the gods are not happy. Well, we're playing a game where the gods exist. Maybe they literally are trying to tell the players or the countryside that they're not happy. Use it. It's an old trope, but it's
one of the oldest.
Yeah.
As for me, I kind of said it at the beginning. I use like thunderstorms and rain to set my scenario or my setting dark. And it's kind of not just a foreshadowing element. It's also a tension building moment, because they know that going outside in the storm during a thunderstorm, it's going to be dangerous. It's going to be awful. Their ranged abilities are going to be cut down. Their ability to see or perceive danger is not going to be as useful to them. So I do use it to build tension. I do also use it for specific moments, especially if they're fighting someone like a druid or a wizard, or even an evil necromancer. The thunder crashes as they raise their staff into the sky and cast and speak aloud the words to grab hold of the storm itself and power their spells. If you can get a wizard to have a bolt of lightning power their spell and supercharge their spells, like just that moment of the party knows they're going up against a wizard who has this ability, who has used this ability to kill people from great distances, and they arrive at the location only at the beginning of light rain, and they know it's the storm season. They know they're going up against this wizard and it's just started raining. Is your party actually going to go charge that wizard before the thunderstorm arrives? Or are they going to hold back and hope to God the wizard doesn't have their number?
I mean, a setting where you've actually like spent time building on the idea that the wizards are actually manipulating weather to some extent. Yeah, that would be an interesting question.
Yeah. If and the when I said that I had thrown a tornado at a party once, it was only one time. The party thought the best plan of action was to start a forest fire to smoke out a individual who had stolen from them. They went so far down the path of, well, we don't care about this world. We don't care about what's going on in this world. We don't care about, what the game master, had, scenario that they laid out. We don't care about any of this. We're just going to burn the forest down and get our stuff back.
That's
they pissed off a druid. I'm like, okay, well, you're all rolling new characters. Why? You've pissed off not just the druids, you've also pissed off the dryads, the local fae. They're sending a tornado at you. Like, well, do we get a chance to roll for survival? Sure. If you can make a nat 20, I'll let your character survive, but you're not going to be here anymore, and you're not going to have your stuff. One person rolled nat 20 and decided, nope, they would rather just let the character die and start over. It didn't go well for them. I was also really, really pissed off that day. So, as far as challenges and obstacles go, and I know we've listed a few, especially visibility. Visibility is a major factor when it comes to storms. But what other kinds of challenges or obstacles can certain weather conditions present to players? And it doesn't even have to be terrestrial weather. It could also be weather in space. It could be, solar storms or, a supernova that's gone off in the local star cluster.
Something we haven't talked about is drought.
Okay.
Having a drought, no rain can really screw up a whole lot of different things, from the economy to the health of the average citizenry in your areas, to even intergalactic wise. If one particular planet that makes this one particular product is having a drought or something like that, and suddenly you can't get your whatever product that might be, raising prices, making things scarce or completely unavailable, and people are starving everywhere. And, every time you go to a new town in an area or a new city, the people are, on edge. All it takes is 3 meals for a society, go 3 meals without go without 3 meals, and a society can literally break down right then and there, just because they're so used to things being a certain way, or they all snap and realize, hey, maybe my neighbor's on the menu now. Especially if you're, hey, Raven, when you're dealing with non-humans, whether they be humanoids from a fantasy game or aliens or something like that, hey, their livestock food is now gone, and so they ate up all their livestock, and now they're going on a jihad, in deep space, looking for new things to eat. And guess what? Humans are now on the menu. Same thing with kobolds or goblins or orcs or something like that. Lizardmen would be a great one. Suddenly, well, maybe not, because they probably just live off fish. I don't know what lizardmen eat, but I'm just assuming it's something,
meat.
Yeah. But, not to mention, just travel. If it's not raining, maybe water's a, scarce commodity as well.
That is something I touched on. I think it was last year when we had the water as a consumable topic, where, especially in very arid climates, like, water becomes not just a necessity to life, but it also becomes a trade good or a trade commodity, especially in like desert areas. So, weather can impact the trade of water very fiercely. So when a storm comes, everybody brings out their rain barrels, because that's their chance to get rich, so to say, or at least be able to survive long enough without having to pay for the next water salesman to come along.
I mean, cisterns are a thing for a reason, after all.
Sure,
Mhm.
it is.
I mean, if you're playing domain play, having the players as personal fiefdom have a drought could, do some things.
Yeah.
Guys, you're killing me tonight. Indeed, Six Nations. She does that everywhere.
What
she
about
goes.
you, Mar? What about you, Mar? What kind of challenges and obstacles do certain weather conditions present for your players?
Well, having weather that obscures your vision come up while you're trying to find something is always going to be annoying. Although not necessarily annoying in a fun way, but just like annoying in an annoying way. Like, especially.
But think of how many times the players have used some sort of obscurement spell. Turnabout's fair play.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's fair.
Forcing a battle to end by having, like a fierce hailstorm start pelting everyone to the point where it'll actually injure the combatants. That's the thing that you could throw at the players.
One of the books that I'm reading, have read, is the Brandon Sanderson Stormlight Archive, and it is a world that is shaped by storms. If I were to run a game in that setting, storms would be part of their lexicon. It'd be part of their everyday. Like there's a storm that happens to just go across the entirety of the world like once a week or once every other week or so. So it's part of their ecology, and it's not just any storm either. It is like hurricane force winds storm that happens every other week or so. So if you are in the middle of a pitched battle against a hardened enemy, and this what is known as a high storm is seen in the distance heading your direction, like it ends fighting. Like no side wants to be caught out in a high storm. No side at all. Nobody. So what do? You seek shelter immediately. It ends combats very rapidly. Now, granted, when the high storm's over and it's blown through the area, combat might resume if people are still able to fight afterward. But it's definitely one of those scenarios where the severe enough weather can not just impact what the players are up to, but it can also impact their plan of what they were going to do for that day. And again, this is something that should be rolled randomly, or it should be on a calendar like schedule. Especially if your world is like the world of Roshar and Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, where the storm is kind of on a schedule and people have the ability to mostly predict when the next one's going to be. That the next high storm might be the next couple days. You're not going to go do strenuous activities. You're not going to do anything that's going to get you caught out in the middle of the storm on purpose. So you'll end up having players and decision makers go, no, high storm should arrive any day. We're not going out there to march across 50 miles of terrain with the possibility of a high storm hitting us at any moment. We're not going to get caught in that.
I forget which book it was I read this from, but it was a sci-fi set, and the person writing this is like, it's an alien planet, but borrows
I think his internet just died on him again. Yeah, I think Mark just had his internet die again. Speaking of weather and what it can affect, it apparently can also affect your internet. He'll be back. So, as far as weather and how it affects your world, do you ever use weather, and have it tied intrinsically to players in any way? Like they were born at the height of a storm or something?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I was actually, me personally, that's why I use it. Is I was born on a rainy Monday morning, so that's where I get my sunny disposition. Um, especially with, you know, not good characters, or even, if you want to go the reverse, a paladin was born, during a freak storm, or Conan was born, in the middle of battle. Well, you can use that as well. But I actually had a character. This was in a superhero game who actually had his powers were derived from weather. He was kind of like a Hulk character. So whenever there was a storm, he would turn into the thing, the beast, the Hulk type of character. Don't want to go into too much, but give anybody any ideas. But I've done that. It may be overused, kind of like a, it was a dark and stormy night kind of thing. But every once in a while, why not? Especially for the bad guys, it just kind of goes hand in hand.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Did you want to finish your thought on that?
What it was is that the person writing that sci-fi novel had borrowed aspects from weather on Earth and weather on Jupiter, so that this planet, instead of having seasonal hurricanes, had a single hurricane that just orbited the equator.
Woof.
And that was something that was
kind of like Jupiter.
Yeah,
the big red eye.
Yeah, and it was just something that's like, okay, everyone knows where it is and how far away it is because it's that predictable.
Yes, Flatey, yes. Weather and prophecies can go really well hand in hand. Absolutely. Just like rain in time. Wheel of Time. And weather, especially in like space faring games where you might be running up against solar conditions. A magnetar might your ship might drop out of its faster than light travel in the presence of a magnetar star, in which case it's throwing out a bunch of magnetic radiation, and it's playing merry hell with the electronics on the ship, or even the quasi-sentient AI on your vessel, preventing you from jumping to warp, but also irradiating your crew. And there might be something within the system that you can use to protect yourself, or even escape from the magnetar, or even a pulsar. And it could lead to the adventure for the session. Just knowing that, oh, hey, we've got this thing that's going to irradiate us if we step outside the vessel. So what if we go to the dark side of this planet and mine it for resources that might help protect us from the magnetar, or even help get us off out of this area.
Well,
warp from the dark side of the planet.
In that vein, one of the craziest things I've seen someone write into a sci-fi novel was a critically time-sensitive extraction mission where we need you to go find something and bring it back. Yeah, that something was on a derelict ship that was currently in the accretion disk of a black hole. Get there, get this stuff and leave fast.
Right. So now, Shadow, you said that you have used weather in a character's backstory, or even as part of a personal quest. what effect did it have on the player and their decisions about their character?
Well, to be honest, the player character with the storm powers literally didn't play unless it was raining. That sort of situation. So it was a great idea, but the character really couldn't show up except cameos. It's a dark and stormy night. You can play that character. Otherwise, you better have another character. Things like that. It was a great idea, and I've used it as an NPC sort of monster kind of situation. They can't find it. They cannot find the beast because the weather conditions just aren't there.
Yeah. What about you, Mar? Have you ever used weather to tie a player character's story or even a NPC's backstory to a quest or to a specific player?
I can't think of anything I've done like that because I just can't think of a single thing I've done where a character's backstory was actually specifically related to the weather.
Ooh, okay. So this is a good question from Mac. Have you ever ran a game with a sudden catastrophic shift in climate? Like a comet hits the planet, causes nuclear winter for a century, which is leading to a global ice age. Who would like to field this question first?
I'm actually running a campaign next year where it's after such a thing happened, and it's going to be up to the players to actually, find out exactly what, because they're going to hear different stories of why the world is the way it is now. Not quite a gamma world thing. It's going to, be my nautical campaign, but most of the planet is water. Didn't used to be that way. What caused it to happen? Do they care? Is there a way to reverse those effects? And land is a premium commodity in the game. Kind of like Waterworld, except I'm going to give them a little bit more land. But if they could figure out a way to drain off some of the water or something like that, then who knows? They could actually be landholders. As it stands right now, that's not an option because all the land is taken up by other families and other kingdoms and things like that. But they want to strike out on their own. Maybe figuring out a way to make the water recede, which it should at some point. Depending on how you look at things. The Great Flood, all that water went somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, that actually is like one of those things that, like with sci-fi stuff, is that it's like maybe this planet someone was trying to terraform it, and oops, they screwed up, and now there's like only a little bit of land here and there.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the question here with that Mac has asked, I do actually have. So I am working on the Bronze era of the game world. I'm working on, but something happens during either the Bronze era or near the Iron Age, where one and it's going to be no secret that I have flying islands in my game world. It's one of those tropes that I truly enjoy, and I blame Square at the time, Squaresoft, now Square Enix, for this, because my absolute favorite game all time is Chrono Trigger for the Super Nintendo, and it was my first introduction to flying islands and a kingdom in the sky. So it's going to be no surprise to anyone that yes, I do include a flying kingdom in the sky. Now, again, at some point between the Bronze and either early or mid Iron Age, part of those islands are going to fall into the sea. The sea level is going to raise quickly and very high. I'm talking like hundreds of feet of water starting to rush upward due to displacement. So it's not just going to change the ecology of surrounding land that is on the coastline. It's going to change weather patterns, because now that giant chunk of earth is no longer in the sky. It has made impact in the ocean, and it's formed a new continent, effectively or resettled a continent that was part of the world to begin with. And it's going to change, jet stream patterns. It's going to change weather patterns. It's going to throw a lot of water into the air via steam, or even through the massive waves that are going to lift up that water. So yeah, at some point during the prehistory of my game world, they go through an ice age because this landmass fell from the sky and impacted the water. See here. I'm just going to make my way through chat before I get to how I use storms and personal for tying characters to story. Characters can find themselves in increasingly harsh weather climate. Yes. That is an absolutely awful weather to be in. It is just dank, chilly drizzles that last for days. That's just awful, especially if you're outside camping. That is an interesting concept. Nuclear winter and vampires in one game. That would be interesting.
I do recall some setting where the grand plan that the vampire... Oh, it was an Elder Scrolls thing. That the vampire cabals had this grand plan to make it so that the world would be perpetually in night.
Mm-hmm.
So in that, solar eclipses would be seen as ill omen because of the fact there's like, are the vampires at it again?
Yeah. So as far as incorporating weather into either a character's backstory or tying a specific character to weather, and this is going to come into play again in my next game, the Bronze Era game, because there's going to be a lot of emphasis in the game world that is tied to specific constellations. Some of those constellations are tied to storms as well, because they only appear during certain seasons. So when the season's right, a player might have been born under the auspice of a great storm that ravaged the countryside, and now that character has this omen on them, or this presumed curse that wherever they go, destruction follows. So I might use something like that, and I'm getting to the hypothetical here because I haven't run that game yet, but it is my plan to do so. And especially if the character or if the player is building a character that is going, depending on the player, might play a tyrant-like character. Wherever they go, destruction follows. Especially if they're a murder hobo. That might be something I do, and it kind of adds to their story. It adds to them and their presence in the world. So when they enter a town, people are like, no, you can't be here. We can't have this town destroyed. You have to go elsewhere. You have to leave. Because the story of the character, it precedes them. Wherever they go, destruction follows, or a storm follows. So you can use elements like that, especially if the players have built reputation of pretty much destroying everything they leave behind. Or you can have the opposite where,
And what party hasn't?
Right. Or you can also have the opposite, where if a party member happens to be a druid or a person who works with nature, wherever they go, fields of flowers bloom. Wherever they go, harvests are plentiful. You can have the opposite effect as well.
Dark Sun did a lot of that with the defilers. Whenever they used their magic, it destroyed the natural greenery within a certain radius. The opposite, that's I don't know, that's a little much. I mean, there would be factions that would want to capture said character,
absolutely,
and be okay. Guess who's our new shepherd and gardener for the king's farmlands.
That is actually something that some people have pointed out in certain settings about the whole idea of having like truly powerful druids, people who really can control the weather. It's like that would be one of the top commodities in some places.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gravitational effects on Mm-hmm. So there are plenty of things you can do with weather and characters, and especially if the players have built this reputation that wherever they go they make it better than they found it, especially during like a cataclysm game where they're the survivors trying to rebuild civilization. You are going to have factions go, hey, we've got rumors of this this character, this person out in the world. Wherever they go, fields bloom. We want that person. We don't care what it takes. Go capture that person. So if it's a party member, they're going to have factions trying to take them alive from the rest of the party. They're going to track them down and try to, and it could drive the plot. It could drive the players towards a idea or plot of you're like, no, we need to take care of whatever faction it is. We need to put an end to them. Instead of flowers blooming wherever I go, destruction will rain upon those who wish to take me. And let the players take that and make it their own.
The thing that Six Nations was talking about with dome cities, I was thinking and realized that I have actually seen in fantasy fiction an example of dome cities where it's a magical force field. And they're like, oh, our city is flooding, so we're just going to use magic to keep the water out.
Specifically what he's talking about there, because this lets me know that Six Nations has actually played Chrono Trigger. That was one of the settings in the game, was a far-flung future where people lived in dome cities, and it was after a catastrophic event that left it cold and dark on the planet, and where life was starting to recede. I as soon as I read that, I knew immediately that not only had they played the game, but they remembered it well as well. So, Dungeons and Delvers has an awesome hard spell that make the very land bountiful, but it's a king's term spell, like a year. See the max result. Oh, okay, interesting. That is something you can actually add to the game as well, or have, if players want the access to, is the ability to change weather to their whims. And then this is something that I think now I don't necessarily. I don't have a problem with players changing weather, especially if they are of a druid or spellcasting class to be able to do so. But how do you handle players who attain that power and can then change weather to their whim? Shadow, how do you handle that?
It's only come up like once, and it was in a sci-fi situation where they had gained the ability to terraform, planets within their sphere of influence, and it really, it didn't have there. I really couldn't come up with like, some sort of, counter to their desire to, for lack of a better term, mess with it. So it kind of just, was just one more thing that they could do. But in retrospect, I would probably bring in the gods of nature, the gods of weather, things like that. Bring them in if they're going to start, messing with the world on such a scale like that. I would probably, bring that kind of magic to bear against them, because that's not really their place to do unless they've got permission or backing from some other deity. And in a sci-fi game, I would probably use other things. If they start messing with the normal natural cycle of a planet, well, that's going to have some pretty drastic consequences: earthquakes, droughts in other places, crazy wind, and those kind of phenomenons. You know, actions have consequences, and if you're going to start, you know, shooting for the big leagues, then you're going to have some big league problems. Like I said, earthquakes, tsunamis, things like that can start happening. And with earthquakes, you're going to get volcanoes, which could set you back even further.
If it's a setting that has deities like the old Greek gods, the gods are like, oh, you think you're allowed to.
Right. I think his internet just died on him again.
The gods have spoken. Don't do it. Don't mess with the weather. Maybe a little bit here, a little bit there. Maybe you need to get your boat a little bit faster. You need some wind, but you're probably gonna have to make a sacrifice of some sort, or beseech your god to see if it's cool that you do these higher level magics. Otherwise, you're probably stepping on somebody's toes, and they're probably there's probably going to be a cost.
Yeah. If Mark comes back while I'm talking, that I'll let him finish his thought. But as far as players being able to change weather patterns, actions have consequences. I have said it a great number of times while on this show over many, many weeks. Actions have consequences. If you roll random weather at the table and it's raining or sleeting or snowing or whatever the case might be, and the player who has the spells that can change weather to their liking goes and says, hey, you know what, I don't want it to rain today, I'm going to make the rain go away. What does that do to the local ecology? What if they are like, you know what, it's been a really nice week, this one day of rain, we're adventuring this day, I don't want it to rain this day, let's push the rain out just one more day. How many farmers are they going to piss off who've been waiting for rain for weeks to water their fields? Where farms don't necessarily have irrigation. If they find out that a weather wizard is messing with the weather, what is that farmer going to do? What are those communities of farmers going to do to that weather wizard? And if they find out it's a player, man, that player is going to have a tough time trying to buy goods from any of them. Because they've been waiting weeks for weather, or the characters are like, you know what, we don't, we know we're going into a situation where combat is likely, mass combat is likely. What if we kicked up a rainstorm to make it very difficult to track us and very difficult to follow us, because we're a small light team and we've got a whole army of orcs marching after us. Let's sink them to their knees in mud and let's float across the top and leave a wake of water behind us. What's that do to the druids and the dryads in the forests? Will they help the PCs in trapping and killing the army of orcs that are on their tail? They could. Mar, are you back with us? Nope, I think his internet's still acting up. I'll give him a moment to yep, yeah, there he goes. Just like that. Man, it sucks when you're having internet difficulties. I've had it myself in the past, and it's killer. It really is.
That was a weird
Welcome
thing.
back.
It's I've been noticing that it's like sometimes I have like one-sided network issues where I'm getting no uplink but plenty of downlink and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And like that one, the whole like net graph went U-shaped for a second, but it came back. However, it came back with you not being able to hear me when I said anything, even though when I look at the little thing in StreamYard, it would have the little gray circle. Get it, but whatever.
So do you want to finish your thought on the previous characters who change weather?
Well, what I was saying is that even if the farmers have cisterns that they can draw water from, those cisterns aren't going to last forever. And it's entirely plausible that they were counting on the rain to refill their cisterns. which could also mean that the people of the town no longer have water to drink.
Yeah. That's very true. Let's see here. We've kind of gone a little out of order now because it just segued right into the characters being able to change weather.
Well, see, it's the order. It doesn't really matter as long as we hit all of them. It's not like the viewers know what the order was supposed to be in the first place.
Right. I mean, we don't necessarily need to hit all of them. And in a lot of, we've started putting the questions into the video description to maybe generate or help you generate thought for your own games and your own use of some of these topics and some of the questions we consider when we decide to run a topic for Gatekeepers. How important is the topic to you? Is it something you want to think about? Is it something you want to put any, thought points towards, including or not including? Is it something you as a player want, to maybe see at your game table? And if that's the case, drop a link to your game master and be like, hey, I've noticed that every day we go adventuring, it's pleasant weather. Why is that? Why isn't there bad weather? Why isn't there some element of misery or foreshadowing of storytelling about some of the events we're going to? And some game masters just don't want to deal with it, and I get that. I've been that game master before, where I just didn't want to think about it, and I didn't roll random weather because it didn't matter to me as the game master at the time. But it can definitely have an effect on the game and effect on players' actions and what they can and can't do. So, and this next question is going to touch on kind of the one of the earlier questions, and that's the passage of time. How do you signal the passage of time using weather in your games? Do you always stay in just one season, or do your seasons change from time spent in the game? Shadow, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I definitely, like I said at the beginning of the show, I use the seasons, and players aren't always, go, or they shouldn't be. There should be down times, and sometimes you can use that. Force them into, staying in this area because, the mountain passes are, impassable because of the weather, whether it's a flood or snow or something like that. Or, maybe that's when, all of the whatever, pick your favorite monster, that's when that's their hunting season and nobody goes, past these, markers because you're just asking to get et while, traipsing through the forest. So, the local villagers or the townsfolk say, don't go, stay here and everything's fine. And, you can also use it to embroil them in a city or town adventure, maybe while they're, stuck at a hunting lodge or something for the winter, there's a psycho killer, on the loose somewhere. I was doing a review of one of the Ravenloft modules where they were stuck in this area and they couldn't leave because of the snow, etc. And there was werewolves abound, and it encouraged the players to go and put a stop to the werewolf menace, track them down, find out who is the werewolf or werewolves, and put a stop to them and give them an adventure. But at the same time, when that's done, that season's over and they can move on and have safer travels, because right after winter you can have spring, and it's safer and more of an ideal situation or time of the year to travel. There's a reason why had the Donner Party picked a different time of the year to travel, we would have never heard of them.
Well, I mean, and the Donner Party is not even the only example of that, because
Right.
in those days, like the locals who were like the various native tribes would have told you, it's like, yeah, traveling this time of year is a terrible idea. And there were a lot of cases where someone's told not to try going through the mountains because the weather's too cold because it's winter, and
Mm-hmm.
they didn't do it, and decided to press on anyways. And there's one case where one guy stumbles to his destination, bedraggled, half naked, because his clothes got ripped up while he was hiking, because his horse died and all sorts of crap like that. And
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Seasonal changes also can be marked by festivals, and especially like right now, we are getting ready for a harvest festival. Here in the United States, Thanksgiving. It's one of those great traditions in America here, where we sit down around a table, the harvest meal, and have family. And you can include the changing of the seasons via solstices, equinoxes, and they can have presence in your world if you give them the attention they deserve. And weather and seasons play a role in a lot of those instances. So as you get into a fall weather scheme in a certain climate, it's going to become rainier. It's going to become colder. People aren't going to go as deep into the woods, because they want to make sure they can get back, or it might be muddy conditions. And people of towns are going to tell outsiders, "Hey, we realize you're an outsider. Don't go into the woods after the second week of fall. You will get stuck out there. It becomes a swampland instead of a forest, with hard ground. It becomes swampland. Don't go there." Because in theory, the local inhabitants will know their territory. They'll know what the seasons do to their land. As both of you already said, you don't go into the mountains during winter, because you will get stuck and you will die there, or you will come very close to dying. Now, if, for example, if a party has no choice than to travel because of time constraints, they're not going to listen to those warnings. And those warnings from the game master at that point are, hey, prepare, get ready, because shit's about to get real. And I'm not going to let up off the gas on you. This is what you're heading into. Be aware of it.
As a counterexample, though, there are some places where they tell you not to go in the warm and damp times of the year, because of the fact that the ground turns soft and muddy, and if it's cold and freezing, the mud is solid and you can just walk across the mud. But if it's and also it's like sometimes that the mud dries out, and that's fine too in the middle of the summer. But when it's rainy season, nah.
Enjoy your day, Mac.
Take
Thanks
care,
for
Mac.
stopping
I'll
by.
talk to you soon, buddy.
I'm going to be speaking of roasting, I'm going to be smoking a brisket tomorrow for my Thanksgiving. We don't do turkey here in the tavern. We do brisket.
Baby back ribs.
Can't do pork anymore. We used to do a spiral cut ham, but now we can't really do pork as much anymore. It sucks. So we've turned to beef. Digestion issues.
Oh.
It's just awful. We spend the next several days
that
or
doesn't
weeks.
include bacon, does it?
No, it does not include bacon, and there will be bacon tomorrow. I guarantee it. On at least 2, maybe 3 of our dishes.
One thing that I've always loved is trying different things, and that's because, like, bison. Ooh, a nice piece of roast bison. That is some nice stuff.
Never tried that. I've got a place down the road. I noticed they have a sign up that they do that. Probably gonna have to give that a try one of these days. But
when I was living in Colorado, you could just buy bison at the grocery store, because Colorado is one of the places in the U.S. where they actually have ranch raised bison.
Right.
Nice. So as you know, and continuing on the idea of seasons and changing of seasons, some seasons will lend themselves, as Mar said or pointed out, to different types of adventures that you can potentially have with your party. Summertime adventures can lead to vast fields or even rich and lush forests or even mountain climbs. Whereas winter, you want to stay away from those mountains. You want to stay away from any place where you could become stuck, indefinitely. And changing the seasons also has different animal patterns, animal movements. You could be traversing an open field in the middle of or towards the end of summer, and suddenly you're set upon by a herd of bison moving through the fields, or a herd of some kind of beast of burden, because it's their migration season, and you just happen to be in their way.
Nothing to mess with.
Stampedes can kill you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
there's
you
literally
could use it.
Nothing you can do about it. If you can't fly or levitate, you are SOL.
Absolutely. So, and those are things that players might actually use that knowledge to their advantage. They know that herds of bison or herds of deer travel through the area during this one time a year, or during one of 2 times a year, and they happen to know it's pretty close. So if they've got an enemy that's pursuing them that doesn't know the area, they could lead them into one of those paths and start a stampede against their enemy, or vice versa. If the players are new to the area and they don't know anything about it, the enemies might use something like that to their advantage, and suddenly the players now have to find themselves a way out of danger.
I mean, and with stuff like bison, controlled stampedes are a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, they are. Let's see. Migratory or giant island sea tortoises moving. Yep. Available food sources. Yep. Man-made weather, like incoming yeah, that would be pretty awful. That would be pretty awful there, Fleety. And I know this is something Bruce did for his one shot on Table Breakers. Was our party had actually just gotten done holding up for the winter season in the mountains of the dwarves. And we were silver traders, or actually we were the caravan guards for silver trade. Yep. And we had to guide them back down the mountain during early spring. There were a lot of scenarios, or a lot of potential there, where Bruce could have definitely thrown us off that mountain with sudden avalanches because of warming snow, mudslides because the ground had become too soaked, and the rocky soil just gave way on us. There are definitely potentials of extreme danger that were not combat, and there's it would take quick thinking and spellcraft to be able to navigate some of those scenarios, or quick thinking and survival to navigate those scenarios.
Like there are actually real world examples of people finding campsites where it's like, these people died because a hailstorm beamed them all, and they got hit with hailstones large enough that it killed them all.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's see here. Weather encounters. Given that we're only 15 minutes from the end of the evening, I'm going to go into the last one, the last question for the evening. And this is tips for new game masters. So, Mar, I'm going to start with you on this one. Your internet seems to be doing well for now. For new game masters looking to incorporate weather, or game masters who are seasoned but don't typically include weather into their campaigns, what advice would you give them?
Think about what makes sense. mean, like I use that example of the snowy mansion on top of a mountain. It's like, it's like that's just what the environment on that mountain is. It's not something special and unique to the mansion. It's just terrain. And just it's like very, very simple. It's like, what is the story? What is the environment? And you just like ask questions of all of those things. And like, if you don't have a specific reason, you can just say that, oh, it's a sunny day with a few clouds in the sky, and call it good. You don't need to be more in depth than that. But if it makes sense to have, like monsoon rains and heavy lightning outside, maybe if you try hiking through the woods in this time, there's a chance that a tree might get blown over while you're standing next to it or something weird like that. If it makes sense for the story, go for it.
Actually had that happen in real life. I was actually on my way home. This is when I was back in high school. We were on our way home from a game, and winds picked up real hard, and had a tree almost crash right into the bus.
Well, I mean, that
Very
example
situation.
I mentioned earlier with Hurricane Isabel and me breaking a tree branch with my shin, I was clearing fallen tree branches off the road so that people could actually drive on the roads. And, I was pulling it off the road, slipped in some mud, and crunch.
Ouch. So, are there any pitfalls that you would suggest new game masters avoid, or specific considerations that they should keep in mind when using weather as a storytelling tool, Mar?
Think about what you want to do with it before you actually bother putting it. It's like I said before, it's like if it makes sense.
I think we're losing them. Yeah, seems like we're losing them. Okay. So Shadow, while we wait for Mar to come back to complete his thought, what tips for new game masters would you offer to if they're looking to incorporate weather into their game?
Well, being a dungeon master is a lot like being a writer, and some of us are, failed writers, and some of us are dungeon masters. Some of us, may aspire to both. First thing they're going to tell you is write what you know. If you've never experienced one of these weather conditions, at least do the research. I'm not saying go out and live in the snow or go travel to a hurricane or a typhoon area and wait it out, but stick with what you've been through, work your way up. Weather is one of those like next level flavors you can add to a game. I've been in thousands of games where it never came up, and you can run your game and it never need to come up. If you want to though, add it to your game, do a little bit of research, find out what it's like. At the very least, it's raining, go out and take a walk in it, and find out how much you dislike it, or maybe you like it a lot. Maybe you love, walking in the rain, and you can use that to color your vocabulary when you're narrating those scenes and describing those situations. Add it to your arsenal, your toolbox that you can then use when you're informing your players, what it's like in this particular situation. If you've never been in a really bad snowstorm, you've never even been, in snow whatsoever, maybe hold off or go check out some snow.
Oh, thunder snow. That was a weird one. Thunder snow.
Oh yeah. You know what? That reminds me. I used to actually be addicted to the Weather Channel. You guys may not have been able to notice, but I used to love watching the Weather Channel. That's when I knew I was getting old. I spent a couple of years back he was younger. I'm like, this is great, because back then there were some things on the Weather Channel that made it worthwhile. A lot of survival shows, things like that. At the very least, maybe check in on the Weather Channel every once in a while, because I guarantee if you're watching the show, you're probably hitting middle age to right, Grandma. So do the research before you use it, or at least use what you know.
And sure. What I was saying is just think about what makes sense. It's like you know, if it's summer, having a blizzard seems ridiculous. You know, it's like,
Or a plot quest.
I mean, yes, of course, but like if it's something where you know have a specific reason to say, oh, there's a blizzard now, you should go figure out why. Versus just like rolling on a random weather table and it's like, oh, hailstorm. Okay, have fun with that.
So as far as tips for new game masters incorporating weather, start small. Don't dive into the big nasty storms. Don't don't go too terribly far outside your comfort zone as far as your ability to game master and remind players of current weather conditions or changing weather conditions. But do experiment with it. Don't be afraid to add weather to your game, because it can actually enhance several aspects of what the players do, how they combat the changing environment, and what considerations they take. If I'm as a player going to just, assault a castle, that's on a cliffside, and the game master informs me a light rain has started, that's going to change my plan. I'm no longer scaling that cliffside, because that rain has just made that cliffside slick, wet, and exceptionally perilous for me. I'm going to try to find another way, because that could spell disaster in a hurry.
Or maybe it gives you an opportunity to cause a mudslide to land on the building or something.
Mm-hmm. Or I might go, well, okay, so it's starting to rain. It's probably going to be too slick for climbing. They may not expect me to climb up the side of the mountain. Hey, wizard, you got that spider climb spell going? Let's use it. Because they're not going to be expecting somebody to climb up during a rainstorm. Or you could encourage your players to seek a different path, a path that's underground that you hadn't thought might be there. You as the game master go, the players go, okay, so it's raining. Climbing is not really an option. Is there a cave system down here, near the shore, that leads up into the castle that might be used as an exit point or something? And if you, the game master, hadn't actually designed it in there, you might go, you know what? That's actually not an awful idea. Let's explore that.
And then
to find a cave.
And then after you get halfway there, roll on the encounter table to see if there's a storm surge that flushes you out of the cave painfully.
That, or you find the cave and it's guarded. So,
well, I mean, because I've watched this channel called Scary Interesting, and cave exploration has gone hilariously wrong in deadly ways. And one of them that he's mentioned is that some caves, because they're carved by water, heavy rains will flood the cave. And if you're walking through the cave because you're enjoying its natural splendor, or sneaking into a castle or something, and suddenly there's an 8-foot wall of water coming through the cave. Nice to know you.
Yep. So as far as for my final thoughts on including weather or for new game masters, the pitfalls to avoid are the high storms, the storms that cause devastation wherever they go. Don't overuse them. They might be a once in a great while thing. So avoid the use of extreme weather unless it is something that is possible, through whatever random chart you're rolling on, or calendar system that you're using for the game world that you're playing in. Use weather that makes sense, and don't, for the love of God, don't use weather as a means to barricade players from an area. There's nothing more defeating as a player than when a game master decides you're not leaving this town because I said so. You're not leaving this town because I put a storm in your way and you can't leave. It makes me, the player, want to say, to hell with you. I'm going to leave anyway. And if my character dies, my character dies.
Unless you're playing Ravenloft.
Unless you're playing Ravenloft, then that's the setting telling you can't leave. And that should go sideways. So,
yeah.
Well, I think that is all for us on this topic. I know there's at least one or two questions we did not include this evening. But again, if you do want to, look at all the questions, they are in the video description. You can actually go down there and generate your own thoughts. And if you have questions or comments, you can leave those comments on this video later. And I will always strive to read all the comments. Anytime that they are left. And if you have a specific comment about one of our questions, call it out. Be like, hey, this question here, and let us know what you think of it. I think that wraps it from me. I want everybody out there to have a great holiday tomorrow for those in the United States celebrating Thanksgiving. Shadow, what do you have to add on to this as your closing comments?
Just, enjoy it. You use the weather that you like. You skip the stuff that you're not fond of, especially if it, like running, desert campaigns during the summer in the middle of a heat wave. Do the opposite. It's blazing hot outside. Run your winter campaign and vice versa. Trust me, your players will thank you for it.
What about you, Mar? Any closing thoughts?
If you want to signpost that weather is unnatural, don't make it an ordinary storm. Make it something out of season or special. I mean, like, I use Thunder the Barbarian as an example a lot, but in that one, when they had unnatural weather, they would signpost it by doing things like having crimson lightning or acid rain when, those aren't normal weather.
Right. All right. Well, that does wrap our show for the evening. I do want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us this evening. If you haven't already done so, please consider hitting the subscribe button to this channel and the channels linked in the video description. It helps us grow and gets our word and thoughts out there for others. If you haven't already done so, please hit that like button if you enjoyed tonight's content. If you didn't enjoy tonight's content, please sure to hit that dislike button. I won't judge you. Feedback is feedback. Have a good night, everyone, and happy Thanksgiving for those celebrating tomorrow.